If you know me well, you'll know that I love video games. Collecting trophies is one of my favorite things about video games. Trophies are awarded to you for accomplishing objectives in a game like beating a level or collecting hidden items. If you earn every trophy in a game, you get a platinum trophy. I like platinum trophies because it's a marker to me that I have seen everything a game has to offer. The following is a list of every platinum trophy I've earned so far. The first platinum trophy I earned is one of my favorite games. You really feel like you're a Batman, and his enemies are written and performed excellently. This is the start of one of my favorite game series. It features compelling characters and tons of action. The storyline is like an Indiana Jones movie. And the sequel takes it up a huge notch, opening with an unforgettable train crash. Every game in the series is a blast, but this is my favorite. A remaster is when a game is ported from one system to another with minimal changes. God of War was a favorite among my friends during my freshman year of college. The sequel is the last great game to come out on PlayStation 2. I can't forget climbing up the back of one of the massive titans. In the early years of trophy hunting, it was fairly common to play a game just because it had an easy platinum trophy. This game was about as good as the movie, which means it's not great. I don't play traditional first-person shooters very often, but this was a huge game at the time, and the story was somewhat interesting. BioShock has a very intriguing tone. Exploring the creepy underwater world of Rapture was so unique, and entering a room and seeing a Big Daddy standing there was frightening. I really enjoyed the comic book setting of Infamous and getting the choice between playing a superhero or supervillain. Heavy Rain is one of the more unique games I've played. More like a movie than a game, you get to make choices for your character and then see the result. In the third God of War game, your character Kratos finally reaches Mount Olympus to take the vengeance on the gods that he desperately wants. Sports games are known for having time-consuming platinums requiring hundreds of online matches, but this one wasn't too bad. In Dead Space, you play as Isaac, an engineer trapped on an abandoned ship with deadly zombie aliens called necromorphs. My longest gap between platinums was broken with Mass Effect 2. This series started on the Xbox, but I was glad to experience the journey of these memorable characters. The Sly Cooper series started on PlayStation 2, but were remastered in anticipation of the upcoming fourth game. Sly is a mischievous raccoon thief, but he's more of a Robin Hood than a criminal. Final Fantasy is one of my favorite series. Unfortunately, this game didn't quite live up to my hype. However, there was a lot of potential and interesting ideas introduced. Portal 2 added co-op to the series and made for an awesome night staying up till 3 AM with my friend Matt Knoll to finish it. In the second Sly Cooper game, the levels grew much larger and you were able to control some side characters like Bentley and Murray. Leaving the confines of Arkham Asylum, now you can explore all over Gotham City. Traversing the city by gliding is incredibly fun. This is the last Call of Duty game I played. I just decided after this one the series wasn't for me. In Infamous 2, you are brought to the fictional city of New Marais, which is based on New Orleans. The conclusion in the game leaves you with a very difficult decision. This game explores the backstory of your main character, Nathan Drake, and also introduces one of the more interesting villains. This is the last Sly Cooper game released on PlayStation 2. This game adds some gimmicks like 3D and multiplayer that weren't really necessary. I used to enjoy playing wrestling games on the original PlayStation, but after playing this one, I decided that the gameplay is just too stiff for me to find fun. The sequel to BioShock added an online mode, and is probably the most time I've put into the multiplayer portion of a game to earn the platinum. This is the conclusion to the original Mass Effect trilogy. It was pretty disappointing to see the variety of story decisions you made throughout this series all leading up to the same lackluster ending. My favorite PlayStation podcast, called Beyond, was known for recommending games with an easy platinum trophy. I think I got this one in under 4 hours. This was another easy platinum and one of the least memorable games on my list. Borderlands has a very unique art style and sense of humor, but I never really got into the co-op multiplayer that the series is known for. This game is an interesting puzzle platformer, but the controls just weren't responsive enough. Telltale Games create point-and-click adventure games based on popular franchises. The games play out like a mix of watching a TV show and playing a game. This is one of the few games that has brought me to tears. Final Fantasy games don't typically get direct sequels. This game begins to add a time travel mechanic which is expanded upon in the third game. Taking the underwater world of Rapture and creating something similar but new in the flying city of Columbia was a great choice. I couldn't wait to discuss the twist ending with other players. This game had one of the most challenging trophies I've earned. To get it, you had to beat the game on the hardest difficulty while only being allowed to save 3 times. Dying can mean losing hours of progress. These next 2 titles are remasters of games that originally were released on the PlayStation Portable. It's pretty impressive how close these felt to the original series. In the sequel, they retconned a story of your main character's brother. PlayStation Vita allowed you to play console-quality games on the go. My first platinum on the Vita was one of the best. This tower defense game was so much fun. I wish they had continued the series in this format instead of adding a lot of microtransactions. Soundshapes is a very unique game that combines platforming and rhythm in some interesting ways. In Gravity Rush, you play as Kat, who wakes up one day and realizes she has the power to control gravity. She uses her new powers to fly and fight crime. The Last of Us is possibly my favorite game of all time. It features some of the most well-developed characters in video game history. The story and tension keep you on the edge of your seat. Puzzle platformers is one of my favorite genres, but these next 2 games approach the genre very differently. Guacamelee focuses on speed and precision. On the other hand, Dokuro focuses more on a slow and methodical approach. The game communicates a lot about the characters without needing to say much. Rayman is a more traditional platformer with some very fun speedruns. Hotline Miami is a challenging mix of a top-down shooter with puzzle elements. You'll restart the levels many times while you learn your route. This is another contender for my favorite game of all time. I remember when this game first came out, I thought the combination of Final Fantasy and Disney characters would never work, but the gameplay and charm won me over. This spin-off game tried to add multiplayer elements to the God of War franchise, and it didn't really work. It seemed at the time like this could be the end of the franchise. Thieves in Time brought the story of Sly Cooper to a close. Ultimately, I enjoyed the franchise, but was more excited for what the talented developers at Sucker Punch would do next. Final Fantasy X is one of my favorite games in the series, and this remaster was so enjoyable to play. The characters and story are incredible. The Velocity series pushes your reflexes to the breaking point, but I enjoyed going back over and over to try to master each level. In the sequel to Final Fantasy X, you play with an all-female cast who have become pop stars after saving the world of Spira. This game shouldn't work as well as it does. This is one of my rarest platinum trophies, with only 1.5% of people who have played the game having it. I think this trophy was difficult to earn, but certainly not my hardest. Roguelites are games where the levels are randomly generated, and when you die you go all the way back to the beginning, losing everything. In Rogue Legacy, your character starts with random enhancements and impairments. The Binding of Isaac is another roguelite with hundreds of items you can find to upgrade your character. I did not suspect that roguelites would end up becoming one of my favorite genres. Shovel Knight is one of the most successful games to fundraise on Kickstarter. Built by a small team, this retro throwback combines all the best elements of Mario, Zelda, and Mega Man games. This game doesn't feel much like a sequel to Hotline Miami, but more like an additional level pack. The gameplay is so much fun I didn't really mind. This is a remaster of a game that originally released on the Game Boy Advance and was in 2D. The card battle system is very unique, but ultimately a bit simplistic. It was a long grind to earn all the cards for the platinum. In this remaster, they combined levels from Tony Hawk 1 and 2, but the controls just didn't feel quite right. They are remaking the games again to be released in 2020, and I'm optimistic they'll nail it this time. This was a quick and easy platinum and a fairly forgettable game. Another Telltale game with a really interesting story and some awesome moments. Unfortunately, glitches and bugs, especially in the final chapter, really left a sour taste. This game is goofy and simple, but somehow a good bit more fun than I expected it would be. This is the conclusion of the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy. This game expands on the time travel elements introduced in number 2 in some interesting ways, but I was somewhat relieved to be done with 13. Normally touchscreen games are associated more with casual phone games, but the team over at Drinkbox figured out a way to add a lot of challenge and complexity to the game. A lot of people prefer Kingdom Hearts 2 to the original, and while I still favor the original, the addition of Organization 13 and Drive forms added a lot of excitement. Seeing the journey that each of these characters went through made this game a very emotional end, a truly fantastic series that I hope they pick up again in the future. Greg Miller, my favorite PlayStation podcaster, kept recommending this silly little game. What should be a simple mobile game becomes a lot more fun when a platinum is available. The third game in this series added some cooperative gameplay. This entry just didn't live up to the highs of the first two games. I hope they bring the series back one day. I never expected this game, which is basically a 2D Minecraft, to end up being one of my favorites. My rarest platinum trophy with only 0.6% having it. Earning this one took a combination of preparation and luck. From my rarest platinum to my most common at 95%, the whole point of this game is a quick platinum. It took me less than an hour, but you get to see a jar of mayo dress up in different outfits, so that's fun. A new mainline Final Fantasy game is always very exciting. This game had so much potential and great ideas, but it just didn't quite come together. 10 years in the making and it still felt a bit half-baked. This is a remake of a Game Boy game from 1991. While simple by today's standards, it must have been an impressive feat when it was first released. Unfortunately, this is my last Vita Platinum since I accidentally left it on a bus soon after earning this. The main reason why I love PlayStation is because of the first-party studios they own. Guerrilla Games was primarily known for first-person shooters, but Horizon launched an incredibly deep and interesting open world. As a latecomer to the original PlayStation, I didn't play much of the Crash Bandicoot trilogy. These games are fun but very hard. Here's some video of me actually getting one of the hardest speedruns in the original. This series is one of the first games to attempt to solve the problem of how to take the platforming genre into 3D. Crash took the approach to generally limit your movement to 2D, but making it less obvious by consistently changing your perspective. Crash Bandicoot was also an attempt to give the PlayStation a mascot like Nintendo had with Mario and Sega had with Sonic. While he never reached the popularity of those characters, he is definitely a face for Sony. The Lost Legacy was originally planned to be downloadable content for Uncharted 4, but eventually grew into a full game. Not many series have such rich characters that could support a standalone experience without the main character like this. Birth by Sleep is my favorite of the Kingdom Hearts spin-off games. It features a great battle system and interesting characters. The final optional boss was one of the toughest in the series. I originally played this game on the PS2 and enjoyed it very much. However, when I attempted to replay it for trophies, I was never in the right mood, trying originally in 2013, then 2016, before finally finishing it in 2018. This game didn't quite live up to the heights of the first two, but I will always love being Batman in this series, and I was not expecting the twist ending. Indigo Prophecy is one of the strangest games on my list. The story goes in some very unexpected places at the end, but the game was very innovative for its time. A lot of people consider this game to be a masterpiece. I don't think it's quite that good, but it is an excellent mix of world building and action. This game is everything I wanted it to be. It takes a great deal of inspiration from the Arkham series, while adding the movement of Spider-Man and a very realistic New York City. It's a perfect combination. This is my least favorite of the Kingdom Hearts spin-offs. The Disney worlds were getting a bit tired at this point, and I didn't love collecting the different enemies. Imagine what it would be like to be in a horror movie and have to make hard choices to survive. Until Dawn gives you that in a wild ride of a story. It had been 14 years since the last mainline Kingdom Hearts game and over 6 years in production. This game can never live up to the enormous hype. The graphics and gameplay are top-notch, but I've lost almost all connections to the characters. Guacamelee nails the feeling of what a modern platformer should be, and the level of challenge is just right for me. This is the game that started a genre. It's incredible how much content they fit into this game in 2001. I remember watching my friend Brian play this game on PS2 and always wanting to try it. The game gets a bit routine by the end, but there are some very interesting elements. The story in Beyond Two Souls is more convoluted than Heavy Rain, but the performance capture technology continues to improve and it still left me wanting to talk about it. This was one of the first AAA games for the PS4. By now this game is starting to show its age a bit, but it was still fun to fly around Seattle with different superpowers. I never played the Resident Evil series, but after finally trying this one, I'm starting to see what the hype was about. The controls are terrible, but the somewhat simple puzzles are a lot more fun with the tension of a monster always lurking. This is a really fun twin-stick shooter with a good amount of challenge and great music and visuals. Very impressive from such a small team. This game had so much potential, an homage to a series that so many of us love. Unfortunately, the story is overly complex, while the battle system is quite simplistic, which turns this game into a real drag. This is a great remake that I'm told captures much of the spirit of the original, but smooths out all the rough edges and really modernizes the series. I think I went in expecting too much from this game. It does create an interesting tone and humor, but the experience overall felt shallow to me. It's crazy to me that Telltale Games still have technical problems after so many years, but I still found the story in this game to be one of their best yet. The story in the sequel is a bit less focused than the previous game, so that holds it back slightly, but at least it was my first Telltale game without a major technical glitch. This is one of my favorite games of all time. It was so fun to re-experience this game with my roommates Gabe and Amy in preparation for the remake. This is a game that so many fans thought would never come. This game captures so much of the spirit of the original while expanding on it in incredible ways. I can't wait to see how they continue the story from here. The Last of Us Part 2 had a difficult task in following up on Part 1. While the gameplay lacks some of the surprises that the first game offered, the story makes some of the boldest and most daring choices I've seen in a game.